Hey, it's time now to take a look at our early PPR running back rankings for 2022. We like to start to plan ahead now because we know, look, week 18, we're not going to, ignore obviously those of you that are playing in your fantasy leagues, but we still want to make sure we're already looking ahead for next season because that's what we do as soon as the fantasy season ends. We never stop because we know you always want to have the latest information. So I'll show you what our early look at our rankings are. These are the top 10 lists for myself, for Dave, and for Heath. We'll have a full list of these. You can check them out on the site. Starting next week, we'll have our top 12s, actually, so you can keep an eye on that. We'll also have some of the other guys' ranked lists as well for there. So here's Heath's list of top 10. Now, you're not going to see a lot of changes between Heath's list, Dave's list, and my list because we like a lot of the same players, but you'll see a few of the orders change. So, for example, Heath has Christian McCaffrey at 4, as we show you Dave's list here. McCaffrey slides down to, I think, is at number 9. David Montgomery is ranked for number 8 for McCaffrey for Dave. Heath has David Montgomery in his top 10. Dave does not. So you see Dave's list here of his top 10 guys. I guess one of the bigger differences would be where maybe Dalvin Cook is ranked.
Chubb, too. I've got Chubb.
You got Chubb in your top 10, so do I. And then you get to my list here of my top 10 guys for 2022. Last two guys are the same as well. McCaffrey closer to where Heath has him. So a little bit of difference, but a lot of the same names. And this will change 1,000,000,001 times between now and August, certainly once we get to free agency in the NFL draft. So let's start with the guy at number 1, Jonathan Taylor. Heath, I know you were doing some research in terms of where he's at from his age for dynasty purposes, but is it just easy slam dunk Jonathan Taylor number 1, no question about it?
Yeah, I think it's easy to set it up that way at the beginning of the year. Now, as we've seen this year, I think 4 of the top 5 running backs didn't finish in the top 5. So it's no guarantee that it's going to happen. But you just look at his role and the way that he kind of squeezed Nyheim Hines out a little bit. Remember, at the start of the year, I think we kind of discounted him in training camp or in the preseason because they said Nyheim Hines is going nowhere in this offense. And he was, in the start of the year, really in kind of a committee. And then in the second half, it just went completely the other way. And he is clearly the bell cow and maybe just the best running back in football.
Yeah, we'll see if there's a quarterback change. I doubt it, but you never know what they decide to do with Carson Wentz. We'll see how the playoffs go for the Colts, assuming that they do lock up their playoff spot and make a run. But he just was fantastic. Derrick Henry would have been at the top of this list had he not gotten hurt. So we'll see where he finishes in terms of points per game. He's up there as the number 1 guy in PPR. But Jonathan Taylor just has obliterated the field, a fantastic season. And for those of you that got him in the second round, it wasn't just because of the committee, Heath. It was because of the Quentin Nelson injury, the Carson Wentz injury. His stock fell a little bit from a mid-first round pick to in some cases, a mid-second round pick. And I know for me in a couple leagues, I got him in that spot. And I won a few of those leagues because of Jonathan Taylor in round 2. Let's talk about the guys we have at the 2, 3, 4 spot, which is Austin Ekeler, Derrick Henry, and Dalvin Cook. So Dave, for you, number 2 is Derrick Henry, going right back to the well. Heath and I have Austin Ekeler number 2. I don't think we should discount Dalvin Cook, who we have as a top 3 guy for you and me, Dave. Heath, you have him at number 5. So talk about Henry versus Ekeler. Did you struggle with that decision at all for PPR?
Not at all. I'm giving Derrick Henry a pass on the injury that he had that missed the second half of this season, and you look at where he averaged in fantasy points in PPR leagues this year before the injury, he's still at the top of the list. He's ahead of everybody at the running back position, and I think the Titans, they know what they have in him. They're going to continue to ride him, and I think next year he comes back strong. He might come back strong this year, help the Tennessee Titans make a Super Bowl push, and I'm looking forward to having him back, especially if he's got a little bit fresher legs because he missed half the season. A dangerous weapon for the Titans, a fantastic fantasy running back. Happy to take him at number 2 overall.
Why Ekeler for you?
I just think when you look at these 3 guys, the one that feels the least concerning to me is Ekeler because, yes, Derrick Henry's been awesome for 3 years and finally had the injury. It's not so much the injury that he had, it's the fact that he's now 28 years old.
Yep.
This is the age when we generally see running backs start to fall off, especially when they've had as much work as he had over the past 3 years. And then with Dalvin Cook, I know Eckler's had a couple injuries the last couple of years, but there's hardly anybody who's had as many different injuries and ailments as Dalvin Cook over the past 4 years.
Yeah, I think, the one thing with Cook for me is that this has been a down year for him, but he still, for the most part, has stayed healthy. Now, granted, he had the shoulder injuries that cost him a few games. I also think, and this is something we might have to have a bigger conversation about, drafting guys where there's a clear-cut handcuff. Yeah. And how much that could matter to knowing that you get the one guy, you get the second guy, the production doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And so the Minnesota situation has been tried and true for this season, basically last season as well, that it kind of makes you a little bit secure. Like, think about the Titans situation. We finally figured out it was Deontay Foreman, but it took a few weeks to make sure that was the guy. We don't – the Cowboy situation, at least that's kind of one-to-one.
Whereas in L.A. with the Chargers, if Ekeler goes down, we saw it, one guy did step up, but we know how tenuous it is with Justin Jackson, and we know that he'll also split.
Yep.
He'll split. So there's a lot of players out there, and I think McCaffrey might be one of these guys where if they go down, there's two guys replacing him, and that's a nightmare for fantasy.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that when you're drafting these guys, but at least Dalvin Cook, I've seen the production for 3 straight years of what he can be, so I like him slightly better even than Henry. I'm concerned about Henry. I think he might be coming back too soon from this injury, and they're going to put all this work on him again. What happens to another injury? That's clearly a discussion that if it does happen, we'll revisit. But I just think he's starting to get to that point where you got to worry about the injury starting to rack up. That's just my concern with him going into next season. Speaking of that, we have that with Christian McCaffrey now, who is coming off another disappointing campaign, was not able to finish the season with ankle problems, with hamstring problems. Rough 2-year stretch for Christian McCaffrey. So, Dave, I'm going to guess, based on where you have him ranked, you're almost completely out because I don't think he's going to fall that far.
I don't think so either. And it's twofold. Obviously, the injuries that everybody knows about. 4 notable injuries in the span of 14 months for Christian McCaffrey. And you know who else is going to take notice of that? His coaches in Carolina. And I wonder if they dial back the carries for him moving forward. Do they bring in a Burley back to work short yardage goal line and take McCaffrey off the field? I know that sounds crazy to us, but it's something that they might try to do to preserve him so that he can stay healthier for longer periods of time. The nice thing about him for PPR is that he's definitely going to stay on the field in passing down situations. He's such a dynamic player there that I could expect him to continue to get north of, I can't say 70 catches over the course of the season because I don't know if he's going to play a full season, but we could call it 5-6 catches per game when he's healthy. The risk of him falling off is definitely something that's going to weigh on fantasy managers' minds. It's weighing on mine right now. I'd like to see how the Panthers progress this offseason and how they address McCaffrey and the running back position as a whole.
And I just have a hard time discounting Christian McCaffrey that much more than Dalvin Cook for injury purposes, especially because he's going to most likely have the same coach that he had this year. And that coach, each time he came back, was giving him 20 touches a game when he came back. Now, maybe this will be the time that he changes his mind, but Dalvin Cook probably has a new head coach who's going to look at Dalvin Cook's injury history, and there's another talented running back on the team that has performed so well whenever Dalvin Cook's gone down. I don't see McCaffrey as more likely being pushed into a committee than Dalvin Cook.
It's very true. I mean, look, again, these are the things we have to work through with what's going to happen. Quarterback change could happen in Carolina. Quarterback change could potentially happen in Minnesota as well. So these are the things that I think that fantasy managers are going to be dealing with. So we'll find out what happens there with McCaffrey and with Cook, and obviously with Derrick Henry and what happens with the rest of the playoff run here. 2 guys on the list that I want to bring up, and that's in regard to Najee Harris and DeAndre Swift. Do we have them too low? Now, Najee Harris, we saw what the upside was in last night's game. Breaks off the big run, has over 150 yards rushing. You know that they're going to still run the ball if Mike Tomlin's the head coach. But the quarterback's most likely going to be different. We'll see who that's going to be. DeAndre Swift, when he was healthy this season, Heath, to your credit, you stuck with him, and he had a lot of great moments. But there's maybe some injury concern. And, what's the status of his quarterback and his team around him? Should these guys be closer to the top 5 than bottom 5?
It's not hard to imagine a situation that happens over the next 2 months that causes that. But for the Steelers, they don't just have to get a new quarterback. They have to somehow fix their offensive line as well. The approach with giving the ball to Najee Harris, other than how he finished the season, was mostly miserable on a per-touch basis. It didn't work out very well for them. So that efficiency could take a major leap if they somehow improve both their offensive line and their quarterback situation. It's hard for me to imagine them doing both of those things well. For DeAndre Swift, it's just, can he stay healthy? And are they willing to give him that number of touches?
I agree completely. And I think there is room for Najee Harris with efficiency to be the best running back in fantasy. He already has 70 catches this season. He's averaging 4 yards per carry on the year. That seems like a miracle based on all the times that he's gotten the ball and there's a defender in his face immediately because the offensive line can't move guys. And that was the biggest problem that I saw. It wasn't Roethlisberger as much as it was the offensive line never really getting the chance to gel over the course of the year. So I think Najee Harris has all kinds of upside. I like him better than DeAndre Swift. Swift, it's just a matter of just how much work can he consistently and reliably get from game to game, and will this coaching staff trust him to do it?
Very good offensive line in Detroit. That should continue to be the case for the next season. We'll see about Jared Goff if he's back as the starter there. And look, for the Steelers, we love Ben Roethlisberger from the aspect of he throws to his running backs because he's not mobile. You've heard some talk about maybe, and this could sound ugly for Steelers fans, but maybe Mitchell Trubisky is somebody they're going to target if they don't get a guy in the draft that they love. We know he likes to move a little bit. That could be bad. Or any mobile quarterback could be bad for Najee Harris in terms of what his receptions could be. So, again, things that we'll work through going into the offseason. Quickly, how many running backs do you think go in the first round?
7.
I'll say 8.
Could be 10. Who knows? It's just one of those situations where people fall in love with running backs, understandably so.